All right, it's another Thursday night, and you are here with SK Barrett and Wes Hobrick and
How's it
Real
going?
Monsters. And man, do we have a show tonight.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. People thought him as a gentle giant, but he was anything but.
Yeah, Ed Kemper is, you know, I knew so little about this guy, and then I saw him, I mean, except by name, and saw him on Mindhunters. And then we scheduled him for this week and got to know him. And let me tell you, this guy is different from anybody else we've covered so far. And
I
anybody else
wonder,
and anybody else I think we have in mind to talk about. He is a
definitely.
different character.
It just made me wonder. I wonder what the character study was like for Cameron Britton, who played him on Mindhunters. What it was like to get
Oh
into
man.
Ed's headspace like he did. But
And oh my God, he played him to perfection.
he
Perf-
really did, man.
yeah.
An amazing,
Uh
amazing show.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so let's jump in here on and talk about ah, April 20th, 1973.
Yeah.
What happens?
Absolutely horrible night for Ed when, really the pot boiled over, as they say. And it's a cliche, but he took a claw hammer to his mother, whom he lived with.
Yeah. So he had been out, right?
He had. He had been out for a while.
Oh, it says he
I
was
was.
out at a party.
Oh, I thought you meant out of his
No, he'd been gone.
institutionalization.
He'd been gone for the evening, and he comes home and he goes in and sits on his mother's bed, and she's reading a book. And what does she say to him?
Oh, so I suppose you want to stay up and talk. Something close to that.
Yeah. And that was it. You know,
It
it's
was all she wrote.
that was it for her. I mean, that was really probably the last word she ever spoke.
Oh yeah. Most
And
definitely. I was just looking through here to see if we could get a idea into how many hammer blows they thought he delivered there. I
um
didn't see a number though. So I honestly think that it has to be the most perfect example in everything that Kemper did of just pure murderous rage that came out.
right. So I mean, you take her words completely out of context, out of without the burden of history, and they're innocuous, right?
Hmm.
There's nothing to these words. I mean, they're dismissive, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Uh,
Which
but
is her nature, I think.
but it's not until you understand what was behind those words.
Yeah.
I mean, have you? I've had this experience. Maybe you've had this experience. There are some people in this world that just can get right under your skin in a flash, right?
Oh, absolutely. They know what buttons to push with.
They know what
Those
buttons to
people
push.
too.
Yeah. And they can just stab at those worst parts of you. Um, and let me tell you, parents know those places better than anybody because they installed them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know if we could really call it installed in so much as planted the seed and cultivated it,
Well, yeah,
especially
but
in her case.
I mean,
But
they made those bad places in a lot of cases. So he takes hours later. It's like hours later. So he goes what up to his room and stews for hours,
oh
right?
yeah. Yeah. The night of the murder.
Yeah,
Um,
and then he comes down and he uh, hits her with a claw hammer several times.
yeah. I'm gonna be curious until I get an idea of the number, how
It it
many
was it was a,
blows there were.
it was at least two.
Well, and to give people an idea of what happened after that too, one of the next things he did to his mother's corpse was decapitate her.
Yeah.
And upon doing that, he literally took her head and put it up on the mantle above the fireplace in the house that they both lived in. And he just shouted at it and unloaded on that thing for,
He vented
hours afterward.
he cut out her vocal cords and tried to grind them up in the garbage disposal.
Her tongue, too.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No symbolism there at all.
Oh, absolutely. But man, the pure anger there. 'Cause that was, let's see, 73. He would have been 25 when he killed his mother, Kemper.
He was 25?
25.
Yeah.
If it was, yeah, because he was born in 48, 24, 25 when he did that.
Oh,
And then
yeah, he also fucked his
mhm.
mother's face.
Oh,
He
yeah.
he had sex with his mother's mouth.
Yeah. After she was decapitated.
Yeah. Uh,
So,
yeah. So much. So much there.
yeah. But, and there's so much history that goes back to there when he was a kid. Do we want to move on to that yet?
Say that again?
I was just thinking about the history that led up to that murder, the matricide that Kemper
All right, let's
committed.
let's do that.
So he was born in 1948 in California, and I guess his dad was absent. Might be a bit of a generous way to say it, but
Well,
he was raised mostly by his mother. Him and his two sisters, one older than
they
him and one
they
younger.
the parents divorced, right?
Hmm.
And but not like he wasn't like a baby when that happened.
No, I think he might have been 6 or 7,
Yeah.
roughly.
He was old enough to remember him, the father.
Yeah, but his mother had what could only really be described as a psychotic hatred for men. Um, and to show this probably in the best way you can from their history, she would force Ed to sleep in their basement and
Yeah.
lock the door because she thought that he would sexually assault his sisters.
Yeah, when he's, you know, a child still. This is not,
Ye-
Yeah, he's still a
Yeah,
child at this point.
absolutely. And it grew from there. I mean,
And
he
this is
heard, for most of his life that you're nothing, you're shit. You're not unlike Ed Gein, really.
yeah,
What Ed Gein would have heard from Augusta, that you're a man, therefore you're evil,
exactly.
and you're worth nothing. Not to,
Well, and yeah,
inculcate sympathy here, but it's
I
a sad situation.
no, I think there is room for sympathy in this case. I really do. Um, because, you know, he didn't do anything to deserve this kind of treatment. Um,
No, not at all.
and and I think as we go through the show, we will see more and more evidence that uh, his acting out, um, he didn't. There's at least a part of him that didn't want to do it.
Yeah,
And
like we were talking about off air, this whole thing appears to be sort of a man at odds with himself, a man fighting impulse.
yeah, but remember that as a child growing up, you learn your worth from looking into your parents' eyes and seeing it reflected back to you. That's what my doctor told me. And
Mm,
when your worth in this case, in Ed's case, is that you're not just worthless, you are evil by your
mm-hmm.
nature. Your very existence is um,
Is corrupted,
is
is,
corrupted, and
yeah,
you're going to do bad things, and you're going
y-
to do bad things to women. That's what she taught him. That's what she
yeah.
said to him. That's what she
And
proved to
then
him every night when she locked him in that dirt floored basement.
with the rats scurrying around, and
Yeah,
that's what's so sad here is that it became a self-fulfilled prophecy when you look at Kemper's whole history,
absolutely. You know, I
which,
to give a very innocent, innocuous example from when my kids were little. Um, my it, I kids they like to climb, they like to explore. That's what little kids do, right?
oh,
A-
absolutely.
And it drove me nuts when my parents or my in-laws would tell my girls, get down from there, you're going to fall. I was like, why would you tell
Hmm.
them that? Why the fuck? Why would you tell them that they're going to fall? Why not say something like, you know, be careful. Let me show you how to. I was always saying, all right, you're gonna go up there. Let me show you how to get down.
Oh yeah.
um, but don't plant in their heads that they're going to fall, because that
Hmm.
will cause it to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And that was such a
Most
tiny, and
definitely.
that's such a tiny little innocent thing by comparison.
Oh yeah.
Um,
You know, getting
but
into the really the biggest part of what put Ed on this trajectory of murdering 6 women after um, really the first big murders that he committed were his grandparents when
yeah,
he was 15.
how did he end up there?
He what he went and tried to track down his father
Okay,
was the way that I took it. And I
right,
think it was
right.
Los Angeles was where his dad was. And his dad basically said, I don't want anything to do with you. So he left and he was shipped off to his paternal grandparents,
I thought it
where
was
apparently,
I thought it was his maternal
no, it was paternal. Um, and
because
that's where,
I
yeah,
I just assume I maybe I must have misheard it because they were just like his mother in the way they
right.
treated him.
Well, the grandmother was. The
Yeah.
grandmother was just like his bitch of a mother. And so Ed ends up taking his .22 hunting rifle that he used on the farm and blows her brains out. And what was really weird about this was the
Yes.
second part. He decides to shoot his grandfather to save his grandfather the heartache of finding his wife dead. That's literally the reason that Kemper gave for doing that.
Yeah. So I that is really bizarre, but you know what that shows? I mean, if we're gonna go ahead and take his word for it, and why not, right? He would
Yeah.
have no reason to lie about that.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Um, he had some level of empathy still.
I think so. He really did.
I mean, twisted as it might be in how he was dealing with it,
It
right?
was empathy nonetheless.
It was a kind of empathy. It's like poor grandpa, he's going to be devastated that I killed his wife.
Uh-huh.
So
You
let's just
know,
save him from that.
one thing that I was wondering about this too, there was only one source I saw that mentioned this. His grandfather had Alzheimer's. I'm wondering if that didn't somehow calculate in, if
Oh,
young Ed knew that.
yeah, people didn't really know what Alzheimer's was then.
Yeah, that's true. That would have been what, 1964?
Oh, yeah.
So, but at any rate, after those initial murders, he is tried and he is put in the Atascadero Mental Hospital in California until he is 21. And basically, he was affable inside. Ed Kemper is a very affable guy when you listen to him talk. The guy's
Absolutely.
intelligent, very pro-social.
All of the men who interacted with him, including police, they kind of liked him.
Yeah, they really did. I mean, they enjoyed talking to him. And
And he's
one
smart.
thing that,
And he's a
oh
smart guy.
yeah,
Let's not forget that. He had a way above average IQ.
145.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Although I saw another one that said 136, but still, it's
And
the same.
still,
Yeah,
that's a good
it's genius
40%. That's
territory.
a good 40% above average. And
Absolutely.
and by the way, the IQ scale is more logarithmic than linear.
Hmm.
So, you know, uh, meaning that 120 is more than um, 10 points above 110.
Oh yeah. No, definitely. And when he was in Atascadero, he was tasked with a lot of responsibilities there for an inmate. He helped the shrinks out, and this also gave him he became privy to a lot of the information on the other violent offenders who were in there, because
Yeah,
this is a
he
prison hospital basically.
he studied their mistakes.
He did.
He learned a lot about uh, police procedures and where the weaknesses in investigations are uh, from the other inmates' files, but also from TV.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he would say that quite a bit, that was one of my other big teachers was television. In fact, it was television that kept him from doing things like going to the memorial services of the co-eds he would kill. He
Yeah,
would see, killers making that mistake on TV and he avoided it.
yeah. This guy, you know, if he had wanted to keep going, and that's a foreshadow.
Yeah.
If he had wanted to keep going, he could have gone on, who knows, decades.
Oh, I think so. And that is
He was smart enough to avoid detection uh, for that
mhm.
long. I
Oh
really think
yeah.
so.
And one thing that we should also mention here that I don't think we've said yet, the guy was 6'9" and he weighed 285 pounds.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he's a giant. But
He stood out, and nobody was gonna overpower him.
yeah. But he was, like we said again, very affable, very pro-social. He could talk and communicate
Yeah.
really well. There was one story of, I think it was his third victim, who he accidentally locked himself out of his car before he killed her,
Yeah,
and she was still in the front seat. He convinced her to open the door and let him back in.
which was the last mistake she made.
Yeah. Yeah, but it shows
Yeah,
that he had that sociability.
which was not the you get the impression when you see the interviews of him, it's not the fake charm of a Bundy.
Yeah,
It really seems much more genuine.
I would absolutely agree. And I'm pulling up the parts of those interviews now while we're talking. There's a two-parter that's about 23 minutes total on YouTube. It's really good.
So what happens after he gets out of jail?
He is put back in with his mother in a apartment in Santa Cruz,
Okay.
which it went against the doctor's orders, by the way. They did not want him living with his mother.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Well, they would
I
have
don't.
heard the stories, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah. The shrinks and the therapists definitely would. I'm not, and honestly, I'm not sure how he got back into that house. Why it was that he went there when that was bold faced against their orders. But it's also important to stress there that when he left Atascadero, he was largely viewed as being cured.
Hmm. Here's a
But
here,
in
here's a quote from the probation psychiatrist. He says, if I were to see this patient without having any history available or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illnesses.
mhm, that seemed to be the consensus at the hospital when he left.
Yeah.
Which that was age 21 when he left. Oops, crap! I just copied the wrong thing. This is what I'm dropping in the chat now is part one of a 1984 interview with Ed. So he would have been 44.
Hmm. He still looks really young in those.
Yeah, most of the pics that I got were of him in his younger days.
Well, but I mean in the interviews.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, he does look pretty young in that one.
So he goes back home. His mother works for the uh, University of California, Santa Cruz, and
Mm-hmm.
he moves in with her, and things go just great, right?
Well, nope. That cauldron continues to bubble as she pushes his buttons and calls him a good for nothing. Um, so we have that, and then we also have. It's important also to know that UC Santa Cruz was only recently established too.
Mm,
1965 is when it
okay.
was established. So it
Oh,
had been around for roughly 4 years when Kemper returned home. And this whole idea of the hitchhiker
yeah.
was also coming in from San Francisco at the time. That was also a fairly new thing to go with the summer of love and hippies hitchhiking everywhere. So people were getting adjusted to it, and
Hitch
they say that life there was free and easy.
Well, hitchhiking was a common thing in those days. I remember it very clearly. I've done it myself as a
Oh
teenager.
yeah,
Uh, you
yeah,
know,
but oh yeah, but that's the thing, is that it only started becoming common
yeah,
around this time, where it kind of wormed its way into the cultural consciousness
yeah.
because of people doing it in places like Berkeley and San Francisco.
And it was not unheard of for people to hitchhike cross country. I,
Oh
you know,
yeah,
I know people who did. So the hitchhiking thing became, yeah,
yeah,
he noticed all the
and
girl hitchhikers.
and that was the main area where he would hunt, would be the hitchhikers.
Yeah.
He had an interesting method that he would use through much of that, or through the beginning of it, to help them, to basically keep them in the car, keep them from escaping. He would act like their door was still open when they would get in. So he would reach over. I mean, again, this is a big guy with a
Mm,
huge wingspan for his
right.
arms.
Right.
He would act like he was closing the door, but what he would do is drop chapstick in the track of the door, to where once you get it closed, you're not opening it from that side again
So,
until you remove the chapstick.
oh, interesting. Oh,
Yeah,
he jammed the handle.
basically. Yeah.
Huh. Fascinating.
Not unlike, the other little quirks like that the other killers have, like Bundy using a broken arm
Right.
to lure him. That was kind of Kemper's quirk, was the chapstick.
So he starts targeting co-eds. I mean, and he spends a lot of time, he doesn't just jump right in and start kidnapping and killing.
Mm-mm.
This takes a
No, he's
while.
methodical.
It takes a
Yeah.
while. But why does he? Right?
Ye-
That's a important question.
oh yeah. I, when you look at it, and he would be very slow, very methodical in how he did it. And I think it wasn't just for practical considerations that he would go out and test himself on certain things, but it was also testing how far he could go without giving into the temptation to kill. It was sort of testing his mettle, if you were.
Um, right. I kind of wanted to go into this quote that I just put up that I sent to you
Oh
earlier.
yeah.
Um, you know, among among all of the environmental factors that are, plaguing this guy,
Hmm.
um, I think um, this is another important one, and that he was able to recognize. He couldn't talk to girls. For as sociable and everything that he didn't know how to talk to girls. Now, granted, who does?
Yeah, if you have the answer there, you could become a millionaire many times over, I'm sure.
um, well, I mean, as a young man, you don't know how to talk to girls, not the ones that you're interested in, right? You can know how
Hmm.
to talk to your sister, right?
Oh, sure.
But that's
Yeah,
not
there's
the
always that
same
degree of
thing.
awkwardness.
It's
Yeah.
not the same thing because there's this whole fear of rejection thing going on. And you
Hmm.
don't you don't have to even be told to, but there's a, yeah, if you want to start up a, even explore the possibilities, if you even want to take the first step down the road towards a potential romantic relationship with a girl, that's a different way of talking.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is.
And
Although,
nobody,
honest,
there's
oh,
nobody
go
that
ahead.
nobody teaches you how to do that shit.
Yeah, a
There's
lot of bullshit artists try
uh,
to, but yeah,
right,
yeah,
right. There's
nobody sits down. There's not a manual for it. Yeah,
and there's yeah, there's a lot of urban legends. There's a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of you know uh, uh, things that people believe that just aren't so.
oh sure, yeah.
And
Although,
it's scary as
uh huh.
fuck, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's always that degree of awkwardness there when you do have, those romantic feelings. But with this quote, one thing that I was wondering about was whether it was his actual abilities there or his perception of his abilities.
Just it doesn't matter.
It could. Um,
What
when you have it,
my point being that if he it doesn't matter if he actually had those skills if he didn't know that he did.
well, that's true, definitely. But you also look at it like again, we're talking about a huge guy, 6'9", 285,
Hmm.
and he had no problems getting these women into his car for
Right,
one.
right.
Um, but I don't know. I just think that when you have that influence at home that is telling you ad nauseum that you are nothing, you're dirt, you're shit, and
Yeah,
that just becomes this dialogue. And
right.
I hate to pin it on low self-esteem, but it's kind of the case with
Well,
something like that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, because he's going to, as much as he wants to have a normal relationship, and of the people who studied him have said that absent this, absolutely
Um,
monstrous mother, he
hmm
probably would have had a normal life.
Yeah.
But he could never go into a conversation with a girl that he was interested in without hearing those voices, the voice of his mother telling him that he's an awful person and he's going to hurt her.
Oh, absolutely. And
Not maybe, going to. That he's so bad he had to be locked in the basement to protect his sisters.
yeah, yeah, and
So,
that feedback, it created, like we said, a self-fulfilling prophecy.
absolutely. And you know, if he had had somebody, you know, close to him that he could have talked to, who could have said, Look, Ed, you are talking to girls,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're
somebody to just point
look,
that out to him.
you pull over. You're this, you know, cave troll of a guy. I mean, you're that big. You barely fit in
Yeah.
your car, and yet you can pull up to a hitchhiking girl and talk her into the car. You are communicating with them.
Oh yeah, I mean, hell, you could talk them into unlocking the door for you when they know that you are violent at some level.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, so you're right. He had skills that he didn't appreciate
yeah.
in that arena.
And I mean, if you look at a lot of these interviews, like the one that I posted in the chat, Kemper does basically come out and say that in talking to his mother, the deaths of these six women are laid at your feet. You caused that. You put me on that trajectory. Which, in a sense, I think he's right. He is definitely right about that, although I do believe
Absolutely.
in individual choice as well.
But you can become so damaged that I think in some ways your choices do become limited, or
Yeah.
they become warped, maybe is a better way to put it. Um, your perception of your choices, maybe is another way to look at it. That,
Hmm.
um, I mean, everybody's probably experienced this, right? Like
Oh yeah.
somebody standing on the outside go, you know, why are you struggling with this thing, whatever it is? That should be a snap for you because you have these abilities, and you in the moment are like, what fucking abilities? I don't know about any abilities. I have no choices here.
Sure.
Um,
And that does get back to, I don't know if it was Atascadero or before Atascadero, when Kemper actually did have a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia
yeah,
put on him.
that doesn't seem accurate though to me.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I'm wondering if that might have been, say, the 1950s definition
Yeah,
of it
because there's no
versus the more
evidence.
evolved ones.
There's no evidence of him hallucinating. Um,
Hmm.
for example,
No evidence of a thought disorder at all
right?
that I could see. But, and when I think of paranoid schizophrenia in this realm, I always think of Ed Gein,
Yeah.
who
Oh
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure did have it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a character.
Interesting, both those guys having their mother issues, and
Right.
both of them having that label laid at their feet. But
And one of the problems I have to bring this up. One of the problems in our society is, of course, it's been a historical issue throughout ever that,
hmm
men aren't supposed to, you know, they're not supposed to talk about their feelings. They're not supposed to be
hmm
feelings in a lot of senses. And
sure.
so for him to have, this extent of a difficulty with his mother is not something you can complain about to anybody, because then you're just
Mm-mm.
whining about your mommy. Oh, your mommy was mean to you. No, poor baby, right?
Oh, absolutely. And on top of it, the simple fact that you're talking about a guy who really didn't have any friends or any
Right.
relatives he could talk to.
I'm
In
just
fact,
saying,
I think that,
even if he did, what I'm saying is, it would be completely unacceptable, and he would get no sympathy to complain
mhm.
about how his mother treated him.
Oh, sure. It definitely. And I think the closest thing that Kemper ever really had to friends throughout this
The
were the
cops.
people at the jury room.
Yeah, the
At the jury
cops that
room,
he
too.
hung out with. The jury room was
Top bar
a
that
cop
he would
bar.
frequent.
Yeah, he hung out there, and he knew a lot of the guys who investigated him, and he were kind of his buddies at the drinking buddies at the cop bar.
Yep. They called him, and, he really was a police groupie.
Right.
He would hang out, he would drink with them, they would talk, and of course, he would get tidbits about what they're understanding with the co ed killer cases. And in that, he very much fits the sort of, it's almost cliche by now how serial killers are attracted to cops.
Yeah.
But Kemper fit that to a T.
Bundy wasn't so much though. Ridgway was not either.
Mm-mm.
But many of them are. Yeah.
Yep, and see, I think it. Oh, did you put the picture in that I sent of the jury room?
Yeah. It's in. Um,
Okay.
yeah. It'll come up here, and I'll start this other slideshow.
Yeah, it's still around as far as I know. At least the sign was there. But And that was his favorite spot, man.
My opinion here is that, and so one of the things that you learn from Ed himself is that he was, he had this idea in his head that he was going to start killing these girls,
Hmm.
and but he wasn't entirely sure he could go through with it. So he he would escalate gradually his own steps towards that first kill of the
Hmm.
girls by, like he would start off by just picking up a hitchhiker and driving her somewhere, and then then he would like put a gun in the car
Hmm.
but still deliver her safely. And he would just do these baby steps towards taking that first kill. And he
Until
took
he felt confident. Yeah.
right, right, and
The
which
guy's very analytical in his approach, in
absolutely.
my opinion. Yeah.
My point is that then all of these the steps towards the first kill and all of the six women that he killed, six co-eds that he killed, I
Hmm.
think that was all one progression up to killing his mother. In other words, he had to practice, so to speak, on the co-eds before he could go through with killing, as he actually said, the one that I actually wanted to kill.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. And I also think with that, that it's sort of built up where he finally got so sick and tired of the cycle itself that he wanted to end it by killing his mother the way that he did. There is their house, their apartment.
Yeah.
And then after he killed his mother in there, he also killed her friend.
Yeah. Again, you could call it a sympathy killing, right?
Hmm.
Because he didn't want her to suffer from having his mother gone because they were
Yeah,
best friends. So another weird is just very similar to killing the grandfather.
I think in this one it was very practical though too, because he was intensely worried that this friend would show
Oh,
up and
and
notice what he had done.
right.
But after that happens, he hops in his car, drives nonstop for 3 days, ends up in Pueblo, Colorado.
Yeah. And then he makes a phone call
Hmm.
and he basically turns himself in at that point, right?
Yep. He admits to the killing of his mom and her friend, and then gradually, as the cops keep him on the phone, he admits to what he did to the co-eds.
And how did they take him in? Because he was, several states away.
That's honestly a good question. I'm not sure if I saw that part in the research I did.
Did they say, wait there? We're coming to get you.
It's a really good question. I'm gonna have to look that up while we are on here.
One of the thing that we were have been talking about offline before the show is we can't think of another example of a serial killer who quit and turned
Who
themselves in.
Right, who actively fought even to make sure that their cycle would stop
Yeah.
in the
There,
way that Kemper did.
there was a case. I think it was right before he killed his mother, where he was like trying to stop, and he ended up picking up these two hitchhikers, and they wanted to go this one direction, and he was like, "Oh no, I can't go that way because that will, get me going into that pattern." And
Hmm.
he actually took them to a different way and took them to campus instead of away from campus so that he wouldn't kill him.
Yep, that was another way he tried to stop. Oh no, I guess he did literally just turn himself in.
Oh, he went to the police station?
At first, no one believes him when he's on the call confessing.
Okay.
Um, on friendly terms with the cops. Da 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 da. He sits patiently by the phone until one of them decides to come out and arrest him. Dang.
Wow.
That is crimeinvestigation.co.uk. I'll share the source. And that is, I believe, his third victim, who was a 15-year-old ballet prodigy who was trying to get to San Francisco.
Oh, so she wasn't even a student.
No, no, she wasn't. And I think she was probably the youngest victim.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would think so.
They ranged from about 15 to, I think, 23, 27
Hmm.
in age.
One of the investigators brought up a good point that I tried to make last time as well, and that is they said something to the effect that for the families of these victims, um, this the murder is never stops. It's never goes away. It's always
Hmm.
a factor in their minds all the time, forever. They never stop
Oh,
being affected by it.
absolutely. I mean, it's so true. Another interesting story that I don't think we had shared yet with him. This was after Ed's arrest when he was incarcerated.
Yeah.
His therapist from Atascadero came out to see him in, the maximum security prison. I think was it San Quentin he was incarcerated in? Might have
A-
been.
After the conviction or before trial?
I think it was after.
Okay.
But at any rate, it was his second time, being put away for murder in some form. His therapist from Atascadero pays him a visit, and somehow they get on the topic of the therapist's neck. I guess he's under a lot of stress, understandably,
Yeah.
and it was hurting. He probably needed a chiropractic adjustment.
Right.
And Kemper is hearing him, and Kemper says, "Well, I know a lot about anatomy. Why don't you let me try?"
God, I can just hear that actor saying that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so he gets up and he puts his hands on the therapist's neck and massages it for about 5 minutes, and it helped.
Ah, Jesus.
And this, yeah,
Jesus
yeah,
Christ. Man,
this
oh my
there,
God. I don't think
that's
I could
another
do
thing to
that.
emphasize.
I don't think I could
None,
do
I couldn't either.
that.
I could talk to the guy, but no way. No, you're not putting your
You're
hand
gonna
on my neck.
stand behind me and put your hands on my neck, and you're like twice my size.
Yeah, yeah,
Nah,
you're almost 7 feet tall and damn near 300 pounds.
no.
But
And
it's another thing that speaks to his affability there. The therapist never felt like his life was threatened. He never felt panic, and
well,
neither did any of the other investigators
he
who
was
questioned
also
him.
also male though, right?
It's true. I mean, maybe that's how it fit into everything. But I think beyond that, it was how affable he was
Yeah.
that put their fears to rest so much that, again, he could massage his neck. when the guy is big enough, he probably could have snapped it with one motion.
Right. And, what would it cost him? I mean, he's already never getting out of prison.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there's no downside to Ed.
yeah. In fact, he tried to, when he was convicted of the co-ed slayings, he tried to have the state execute him.
Really?
He pushed for his own execution. But that was around the same time that they stopped capital punishment in California. So
Oh,
they
okay.
said, no, you're getting life.
Interesting. You don't often get requests for that treatment.
Yep. Well, was that Ridgway who wanted firing squad? Or did he want hanging?
Well, that wouldn't have been an option for Ridgway, any of it, because we didn't have the death penalty when he was caught.
So wasn't he known for making that request, though?
Um,
Maybe it was a different killer. I
it
thought it
must have
was
been
Ridgway.
it must have been somebody else, and because I'm pretty sure the death penalty was gone by the time he was caught. Oh yeah, because he didn't get caught for a long time. I mean,
Uh-huh.
he started in the 70s or in 80s, um, but he wasn't caught till like 2001.
Yep.
So the
I remember that.
death penalty would definitely have been off the table.
RC says, sorry, the mental image of someone getting a neck massage from Ed Kemper breaks my brain. Yeah, it kind
Yeah,
of breaks
well,
ours too.
it really does.
But yeah, it happened, man. It just wow.
On the other hand, you kind of are like, do I dare say no?
Yeah,
So there's that
yeah.
side of it too. You're like, which is going to be worse, saying yes or saying no?
It's true. It
Yeah.
also begs the question, how was he out of any restraints?
Um,
I mean,
may,
you're talking about a guy sitting, I'm assuming in maximum lockup.
right. Well,
He
this
would
was a
have to have been out
this
of
is a
cuffs.
this was a psychiatrist who had history with him, so
Yeah, that's true.
he
Maybe
might
that
have
was
he
part of
might
their
have felt
protocol.
comfortable being having him out of cuffs. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
and
Kelly said, oh, go ahead.
no, you what did Kelly say?
Also interesting how demonized stepmothers were in old fairy tales. Yeah, when it's the real mothers who cause so much havoc with the cereals.
Yeah, well, not just cereals.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure that Mama Kemper was worse than Mama Geen, but she sounds like she was up there.
I would. Uh, the thing that might separate. Yeah, they're definitely in the same neighborhood. But
Mm-hmm.
Ed Gein didn't have the same mental capacity as Kemper, and that might have
Mm-hmm.
been what um, separated those two. How those two turned out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You
I mean,
know.
Geen was more than a little slow,
Yeah,
although
and
their mothers were pretty close, pretty similar.
and as heinous as Kemper was, he decapitated all of his victims except his
He did.
grandparents, I think. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it is he was still pretty damn introspective for a serial killer,
Yeah, he definitely was. He wasn't glib like you said, and he wasn't glib like a Bundy.
right? And he had enough self-awareness that he really tried to stop, and he wanted to stop. He just had to deal with that one voice that started it
Hmm.
all.
Kelly wants to know if these killers are generally above average intelligence.
I think they're
I don't know
all
if I'd
over. I think they're
say.
all over the spectrum, really.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
There
It
are,
would be hard to say it breaks down half half.
yeah. You have Kemper and Bundy on the one end, but
Hmm.
Ridgway was definitely below average. He had,
Yeah.
and Geen was way below average.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And then thinking of ones like, let's say, BTK, I would put him more in the middle.
Yeah, pretty average guy.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have uh, Holmes, H. Holmes, who was what some kind of doctor, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was very analytical too in how he approached things. And he was analytical almost more in the ways that the Nazis were analytical in how they killed people.
Yeah.
So I mean with Holmes you're talking about a guy who literally built a
I built.
castle
Yeah,
geared to that.
exactly.
But yeah, and RC says Mama Kemper and Mama Geen are probably sharing tea in the same corner of hell. And they don't even need a burner to heat the kettle over. Amen to that.
You can hope. Yeah,
Yep. I think
they
they'd give
certainly
Satan a
deserve that.
run for his money.
They certainly deserve that. Um, so, which brings up another question, So, I have had people who have talked about mothers who, and let's just stick with mothers, just because it's the topic, but it could apply to parents in general, okay? But who try to, what should we say, minimize or justify shitty behavior from parents by saying, oh, they did the best they could.
Hmm.
And they're, and I don't know how to respond to that. On the one hand, maybe they did, or did they? Did they, or didn't they? How do you know? you know, did they know any better? Obviously, they had their own demons, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
My personal opinion, and you don't know, did she have mental illness? Is that why her husband left her? Because she had her own mental illness issues? Um,
Hmm.
I guess my personal opinion falls on what did you do about it?
Yeah. Yeah,
you
it's
know,
the
did
actions that matter.
did you recognize that you're not being a good person and try to do something about it, or you just go with it?
Yeah. And it's a great point.
I think, you know, if you, eh, eh, it's kind of like somebody who's struggling, say, financially, for example. Are they, if they come to you for help, are they just kicking back, waiting for handouts, or are they really digging in and trying to do some stuff on their own? It makes a lot
Yeah.
of difference on how much you want to, you know, get behind them and help them out, right?
Oh, definitely.
I kind of see parenting that way, right? You can't give them a pass if they're not doing anything to fix their own shit
Yeah.
and
Yeah, you
trying
got to
and
see
try to
some
be better.
initiative.
Right. They got to be trying to do better. They have to
Hmm.
have some acknowledgement that, you know, yeah, I may not be a great parent, but I'm trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
But you don't see that from the Ed's mothers.
No, no, and not even from Augusta Gein.
Yeah,
You
I
know, I
meant
think about
both of
the
them.
big
Both of them. Yeah.
I think about the big difference between those two women was Augusta's hyper religiosity. Nowhere did I see any indications of Mama Kemper being religious,
Right.
and that her hatred of men was motivated by religiosity like Augusta's was.
Yeah. Yeah. Mama Kemper, she was just mean, and
Yeah,
she just hated men,
yep,
just through and through.
essentially. But man,
So, uh, is Kemper still alive?
I think so. I have to take another look, but I'm pretty sure he is incarcerated somewhere. Um,
I don't see a death date.
yeah, yeah, he's still alive.
Wow. Wonder if he saw his
He's
show
71.
on Mindhunters.
That'd be interesting. See who. Yeah, I wonder what he thinks of that portrayal. Of course, it could be that Cameron Britton went and spoke to him
Could be.
to
Why
him
wouldn't you?
studying the role. Oh, exactly. And especially a guy like Kemper who likes to talk.
Absolutely. Then you could just sit there and mimic him right there with like being in a mirror, right?
Oh, yeah. You know, and it's interesting in doing the research on Kemper. A lot of what we came across, what I came across, was had to do with Bob Ressler, the FBI profiler, and John Douglas, because that was another big thing that Kemper contributed to was that individual study of serial killers in the
Mm-hmm.
early 70s that
Mm-hmm.
formed, the core of what the FBI's BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit, does. Um,
Right.
but yeah, both of
Yeah.
those guys.
A lot of the people that they wanted to talk to wouldn't talk to him.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, Ressler said that from what he sees after having studied this phenomena and these people, they break down into two groups. The ones that don't want to talk at all about what they did, and then the ones that will talk your ear off
Uh,
about what they did.
Not much in between.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, really not a whole lot in between at all.
yeah. Yeah.
But
I think, I out of all of the ones that we've covered so far, this is the only guy that I feel any sympathy for.
mhm.
Um, I honestly, I think that had he been allowed a different environment to grow up in, that we'd never know his name.
Yeah. Well, and I agree there, although I did feel, and I do feel, a modicum of sympathy for Geen, too, because he was kind of in that boat as well.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
probably true. That's probably
had he
true.
not grown up on the Madness Factory in Plainfield, he probably wouldn't be a killer either.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it just goes to show, man, what that kind of environment can do to a person. And in my view, it is also a very, very powerful argument against nature being the driving force with a lot of this.
Yeah, there's definitely a um, physiological component to uh, psychopaths.
Mhm.
One of which uh, current research shows that they have actually less brain mass in the empathy areas of the brain. They have
Around the
literally,
amygdala, wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, they
Yeah.
actually have less gray matter in that area. Um,
Hmm.
but again, that doesn't, being a sociopath doesn't make you even a criminal. Most aren't.
Oh,
Uh,
exactly.
and that's where nature comes in, nurture comes in. It's
I think
the
a big part of it is nurture hitting the buttons that were there because
yeah,
of nature.
right,
Yeah, yeah. To where it brings out something that you're predisposed to.
right,
And in a lot of cases, it's serial murder and this kind of deviant sex.
yes, yeah. There's a lot of um, there's also one author that I read uh, uh, pointed out that there is, and it's not 100% of the time, but there's often also um, a head trauma that plays into serial killers.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, they don't know what that means. It's just a data point that seems to pop out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's
Needs
also,
more study.
yeah, they don't know what factor that plays. It's just like they don't know if there's any, if it has a causality at all, but it's definitely a correlation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
and that's probably going to take a while for them to get it. I mean, they're only now starting to understand the, like, let's say with football, head trauma
right,
in football.
yeah, and definitely a lot of there's I just can't. Bundy might be the only case I can come up with off the top of my head where there is no evidence of abuse in his childhood.
If I remember correctly, Dahmer was in essentially the same boat.
Oh, is that
I
right?
didn't think I didn't think he was abused either. He had a really relatively normal childhood. Um,
Yeah. Um,
and I'm wondering, trying to remember too with Dennis Rader, he might also be in that.
could be, could be. But there's oftentimes abuse is a environmental factor in, when you take into account that they have uh, the less empathy because of their brain structure, um,
Hmm.
and then possibly a head trauma, and throw in abuse. Um, that's a is even that is not a guaranteed recipe to come up with a serial killer, but those are important factors.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. The vast majority had this abuse as a factor.
Hmm.
Um, I actually found a university study. It's a bit old, but it looks at this question. I'm putting it in the chat. Radford University. It's a PDF.
While you're doing that, Kelly says, basically, my question is this: why would nature create or permit a serial killer? And I have a theory on that,
You
actually.
do.
I do.
We've
And
touched on it before, but yeah, definitely. Go
I
ahead.
my theory is, and I asked that question myself. What does nature get out of it, right? That's kind of what
Yeah,
she's saying.
what's the benefit?
What's the
Yeah.
benefit the nature has? And my thinking um, and is that that's humans don't have there's no top level predator above humans,
Hmm.
and that. serial killers, or not just serial killers, but sociopaths, because oftentimes they get into um, non-criminal ways of killing people, like police and war and that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
the role of the sociopath is to cull the herd.
Hmm. Oh yeah. To
That's my
inject what an apex predator does where there isn't
yeah,
an apex predator.
right. Yeah, that's my theory.
And here is the abstract from that Radford University study. 50 serial killers who murdered for the primary goal of attaining sexual gratification, termed lust killers, were
Hmm.
studied to determine the prevalence of child abuse. Information regarding the childhood abuse sustained by each killer was obtained primarily from biographical books, newspaper articles, and online sites. Abuse was categorized into physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, and neglect, and was then compared to societal norms from 2001. Abuse of all types, excluding neglect, was significantly higher in the serial killer population. For serial killers, the prevalence of physical abuse was 36%, sexual abuse was 26%, and psychological abuse was 50%. Neglect was equally prevalent in the serial killer, 18%, and societal norm populations.
Hmm.
And it's the abstract anyway. I would ask about that, how they were defining reliability in
Yeah,
things like online sites.
yeah. That's if it's self-reporting, that's
Yeah,
always iffy.
exactly. And then what their definition of societal norm was.
Right. Yeah. Still, it's interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, most definitely. And it's a question that honestly I don't know if it'll ever be solved.
Nah, I
The
don't know.
nature nurture one. Do we ever actually put ourselves in the serial killer's shoes? Imagine what it's like in their brains.
Well,
Have
here's
you
the
done that? Have you done that with Henry VIII, Kelly?
probably. See,
JTR or maybe Madame LaLaurie?
the problem with that is that you can't understand the experience of somebody who is essentially missing a part of the brain that you have.
Hmm.
You can't
You can never
imagine.
get a good proxy for that. Yeah.
Right, right. Um, Sociopaths make up the vast majority of serial killers. Um, they, they lack empathy. That's a known thing. You can't really emulate that in your
Hmm.
when you have it.
Yeah, you can't emulate it the way that they can emulate emotions they don't feel.
Right.
Hmm.
Um, I hear people all the time say, "I don't understand how somebody could do that," and my reaction is, "Exactly. You cannot. Be glad of that.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're not
Yeah,
supposed.
definitely.
You don't want to be able to understand that.
Because
They
if
have
you can, you have a big problem yourself.
right. Um, it's you can't just um, as a writer, if I was going to try to do that, um, I guess the best way I could, um, you know, play a mind game to try to imagine what that experience would be to put that character, imagine that you're the only human being in the world everybody else is
Hmm.
machines.
And Kelly says, I don't know. I think some horror writers can get a little closer than the normal person. You know, that very well could be as well because there's a lot of sociopaths in the general population who aren't violent.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
if they're sociopathic, sure they could get closer.
well, they absolutely could because they understand what it's like to not have that those empathy feelings. Which, by the
Right.
way, sociopaths think that people who have empathy are crippled,
They do.
and that they're the healthy ones because they're not burdened with empathy.
You sure you're not one of those sociopaths, Kelly? She says there's something a little wrong with our brains, and she actually said that before you said what you said there about it being a handicap.
It's possible that people like horror writers. There's a couple of different ways you could look at it. One is that horror writers just have you know, a more active than average imagination. That's not a stretch at all to imagine that. Um, the other thing is that
Hmm.
you know the 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 range of gray matter from highly empathetic to zero empathy. There's probably a lot of you know variation there, and
Hmm.
there's definitely going to be some people who have enough empathy to not be a sociopath, but not tons,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, there's going to be a bell curve like that for most anything else.
Absolutely. And that would mean,
Um,
uh, you know, maybe that's what it takes to be a horror writer, is you have just a little bit less empathy.
well, or maybe the horror writers compartmentalize it in a way that is both similar to and dissimilar to the
Well,
way
that's
the serial killers do it.
right.
And look at like BTK and how he compartmentalized his life
I
like
would,
that.
to take that theme, I would actually say that it's not not so much compartmentalized, but I would say that the horror writers are much more capable of distinguishing fiction from reality.
Yeah, very true. Which Kelly also says they may have the urges, but also understand the consequences more clearly.
Right.
I think these killers understand the consequences pretty clearly, but they honestly just don't care a lot of the time. Because, yeah, sociopathy is correlated with risk taking behavior. And it's not a deficit in their intelligence that makes them take risks because they get the consequences.
To themselves, right? And
Yeah,
and it's a very self-centered view of the consequences. They absolutely don't give a shit about the consequences to their victims or their
right.
families or society in general. They only care about getting caught
Yeah,
and
yeah, and
and how that will affect their.
which is the way that I took consequences when she said it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the consequences to them. Because it would be a grave mistake to assume that these killers as a phenomenon are low intelligence.
Right.
Because as we've established, I think pretty well, they are not all relegated to that side of the curve.
Hmm.
And indeed, as has been a running theme with this show, you often can't tell who the hell they are.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And one of the things that I want to explore at some point, and we could touch on it here for a minute, and that's the role that intuition plays in our lives. And in the book Blink, the argument's made that what we call intuition is really subconscious processing of vast amounts of data that we are unaware
Mm-hmm.
of, and uh, and that's presented to us as feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And um, and that intuition can be very useful, and it can be completely wrong. And it's
Oh
really,
yeah.
and it's, I don't know how to tell the difference. You know, you have, you
Mm-hmm.
have, you have, um, I did online dating for a while and dated lots of women, and they would get they would have intuition about whether, they wanted to go forward with a second date or beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can't argue with that, but they
Yeah.
also never were able to find out if they're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
At the same time, you have like the one prostitute in the Ridgeway case who told investigators she would never get uh, uh, killed by him because she would be able to tell if she was sitting in the
Mm-hmm.
car with him, and she was absolutely wrong about that.
I'm gonna have to read that book again. It's been several years since I've read Gladwell's book, but that is a good one.
Oh, Blink's fascinating. It's fantastic.
I've
Yeah.
read it, and I think I've read Tipping Point too, but I'm gonna have to read them again. Yeah, Kelly also says if you believe every single detective and forensic show on TV, every killer is a super genius, always two steps ahead of the cops. Of
Yeah.
course, you have dramatic license that enters in there, but you
Yeah.
also have, and I think it's important to realize, a sort of bias with those shows. And that's because oftentimes you're getting police, actual police who work on it. And they're
Yeah.
going to want to minimize their fuck ups, for one.
Right.
And they're going to want to make themselves look better than they actually were.
Well, they're supposed to be the heroes, which means they have to overcome a
Right.
a very capable antagonist. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, the idea of a criminal genius is pretty much urban legend. It's
Oh,
bogus.
sure.
It's bullshit. Most of them are idiots.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the other problem there is when you get into too black and white thinking, when you're
Hmm.
looking at a problem like serial killers.
Right.
Not all of them are total morons, but not all of them are, evil Machiavellian geniuses who try to run their own little
I
corners of the world and keep their
Yeah.
slaves.
Yeah, and there there was there I was going to say I've never heard of a case of, these like the Agatha Christie where the antagonist sets up this elaborate puzzle to be solved, right?
Hmm.
That shit doesn't happen
Yeah,
ever.
yeah, yeah. There you have a fine example of dramatic license.
Right.
So I was thinking with those TV shows, not just fiction ones like Law and Order, but also nonfiction, like you could watch on, let's say, HLN or Investigative Discovery.
Hmm.
With a lot of those, you kind of get that bias toward making the investigators look good.
Oh, absolutely. And the problem is that, I've talked about this before. There's a really good TED Talk, and I have had trouble relocating it since I first saw it, where it talks
Uh-huh.
about these different mentalities uh, between a soldier and a scout,
Hmm.
and um, how often um, police aren't the scouts. They should be the scouts. They're not the scouts. The scout is out there trying to find out information, and the
Hmm.
the soldier is out there to, carry out orders.
Yeah.
Um,
I was just searching while we're talking.
and and police who should be scouts are have more of a soldier mentality. Catch
Hmm.
somebody. That's their order. Catch
Oh
somebody.
yeah.
They're
Oh
not,
yeah.
you know, they don't have as much as you would hope the mentality of let's find the right person.
Julia Galef, is that who gave it?
I don't remember the name at all, but could be.
Why Scout Mindset is Crucial to Good Judgment.
Yeah.
I found it.
Uh, Share that link
And then,
out.
yeah, I was going to right now.
Uh, yeah, it's fascinating. Um, you really would hope that police would have that more of that scout mindset because it's,
And it,
I mean, at least
uh-huh.
detectives, right? So they're
Yeah.
supposed to detect.
Yeah. I mean, you would hope, but this also doesn't say anything of myopia coming in
Hmm.
to it as well, which too often, happens. They get tunnel vision.
Well, and everybody brings their personal biases to everything they do. I mean,
Hmm.
you just can't help that pretty much.
Yeah.
Um, but you try to, hopefully, um, be aware of those so that you can catch yourself. Um, it's the old, when you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
yeah, people get tunnel vision. They have their prejudices and their biases, and um, and then you have your urban legends and the mythologies and beliefs that you bring to bear on the thing. Um,
Hmm.
that they're gonna all those things are gonna affect you especially if your predisposition is soldier mentality,
Hmm.
because all you
Yeah.
need all you're just trying to carry out the orders, and you're not as interested in finding out.
Oh yeah, and you also have, um, you have other factors that tie in there too, like funding and politics that can bring to bear
Yeah.
on investigations that are unique to, police as well that can cause myopia. But
Right. You can get forced. Yeah, there's absolutely external pressures to things. Um,
hmm
Definitely. And that's part of the whole. Um, yeah, it's not just there's soldier mentality, all the way down, so to speak,
hmm
in a profession that should be scouts all the way down, in
yeah.
my opinion.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
All right, I think we're done here.
Yeah, I think we kind of beat the crap out of Kemper.
He deserved it.
uh,
The problem is that yeah, he's a likable guy. He really is.
yeah, he
Um,
definitely is.
you know, a lot of these guys, they're just like everything about him just creeps you out.
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah.
he's not. Kemper's not like that. He's. I think he is deserving of some degree of sympathy. I mean, and that's not to excuse what he did or minimize the suffering that he has caused.
Hmm. No, I agree.
Uh,
I
it,
completely
it
agree
it's
there.
an acknowledgement of the suffering that he also has been subject to.
Hmm.
And with
Sadly, man,
yeah, and with
if he
that,
had a
go ahead.
oh,
One
I
more
was just
thing.
gonna say if he had a normal childhood,
Yeah,
maybe this wouldn't have happened. But
Absolutely true. And
one
and
more thing you had?
no, you just got me thinking along those lines of, I was kind of thinking, if if he'd let his mother live and then said, gone, look what you made me do, but
Mm-hmm.
she wouldn't have taken any of that responsibility on herself.
Oh no. Nope, not that kind of person.
No,
Mm-mm.
not at all. All right. Thanks for joining us tonight. And
Thank you.
next week is May.
Oh.
You
Yeah,
know,
we are starting up with something special, aren't we?
we got specialness all up and down the month of May, celebrating women who kill.
Yep.
And
Taking a look
look,
at the fairer sex.
the gentler sex. I love that term.
Uh,
It's so ironic.
yep. Yep.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.